Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Cincinnati. My name is Reverend Connie Simon. Our urban community welcomes all with love, supports learning and spiritual growth, serves our wider community, and works for justice, equity, and inclusion. We're glad you're here this morning. We're also glad that you're here with us for this special service marking International Transgender Day of Visibility. Trans Day of Visibility is an annual awareness day celebrated around the world. It's dedicated to celebrating the accomplishments of transgender and gender nonconforming people while raising awareness of the work that still needs to be done to achieve trans justice.
Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshipper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, come, 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 whoever you are, condemn, worshipper, whoever you're leaving, ours is no caravan, lover is living, ours is no caravan of despair. Come yet again, whoever you are, condemn, worshipper, whoever you're leaving, ours is no caravan, lover is living. Come yet again, come.
Good morning. I'm so delighted to be with you all this morning. Here in this time, when we are creating virtual sacred space together, when we are gathering from different physical, spiritual, emotional, and ancestral locations, it feels important to locate myself and invite you to locate yourself as well. I'm joining you today from my home near the Great Falls. I live where the river the Abenaki peoples call Quinnitagak, or Long River, meets the Mohawk Trail, in the place called Peskiamskut by the Pecumtuck Nation and Greenfield, Massachusetts, by white settlers, not far from the invisible corner where Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire meet. My ancestors have lived in this river valley and in eastern Massachusetts and in German colonized Wisconsin farmland and in the steel mills of Ohio, and before that, Germany, Hungary, and England. Their names were Capitania, Bergdorf, Daniel, Pierce, Orange. I come from preachers and farmers and engineers and artists and teachers. I have other ancestors who have made it possible for me to be here today, too. As a queer and genderqueer person, I would not be here without generations of people before me who resisted oppressive norms of gender and sexuality and imagined a different reality into being. Feinberg, Murray, Kramer, Ginsburg, Roberts. And finally, I follow in the path of white anti-racism organizers and activists and teachers. Braden, Liuzzo, Reeb, Woolman, Kelly Foster. As we gather together virtually, center ourselves, and pause to become fully present in this space together this morning, I want to invite you to join me in calling your ancestors into this space, those who forged a path that has made your life possible. As I light our chalice this morning, please bring them into your mind and your heart. Thank you for that. Feel the power of all those souls that have brought each of us to this place. We are part of a larger fabric, held in a larger web and purpose. Let us worship together.
When Aiden Became a Brother by Kyle Lukoff, illustrated by Kaylani Juanita. When Aiden was born, everyone thought he was a girl. His parents gave him a pretty name. His room looked like a girl's room, and he wore clothes that other girls liked wearing. But as Aiden got bigger, he hated the sound of his name. He felt like his room belonged to someone else, and he always ripped or stained his clothes accidentally on purpose. Everyone thought he was just a different kind of girl. Some girls had rooms full of science experiments and bug collections. Lots of girls didn't wear dresses. But Aiden didn't feel like any kind of girl. He was really another kind of boy. It was hard to tell his parents what he knew about himself, but it was even harder not to. It took everyone some time to adjust, and they learned a lot from other families with transgender kids like him. Aiden explored different ways of being a boy. He tried out lots of names until one stuck. They changed his bedroom into a place where he belonged. He also took much better care of his new clothes. Then, one day, Mom and Dad had something to tell him. "I'm going to have a baby," Mom announced. "A baby?" Aiden said. "Does that mean I get to be the big brother?" "Of course," said Dad, ruffling his hair. Aiden thought that being a big brother was an important job for a boy like him. He wanted to make sure this baby would feel understood right away. The baby needed clothes, so Aiden and his mom went shopping. There are so many choices. Would the baby like seahorses or penguins better? "Are you having a boy or a girl?" asked a lady. Aiden didn't like it when people asked if he was a boy or a girl, and he hoped the baby couldn't hear yet. He was glad when Mom just smiled and said, "I'm having a baby." The baby's room needed to be painted, so Aiden and his dad went to the hardware store. Dad chose a gallon of sky blue paint, and Aiden added a puffy cloud white. "Are you excited for your new brother or sister?" asked the paint guy. "I'm excited to be a big brother," Aiden said. The paint guy looked confused. Aiden could tell that he wanted to ask a different question, and was glad to have his dad there. The rollers were fun to paint with. The room feels just like being outside, Aiden exclaimed. He had always felt trapped in his bedroom before they fixed it. But his new sibling wouldn't have to feel that way. You're right, said Dad. Let's make some shapes in the clouds. Every baby needs a name. Aiden loved getting to choose his own, but he remembered that it had been hard for his parents to let go of the name they gave him. He looked for names that could fit this new person, no matter who they grew up to be. Moss, leaf, cloud, rain, river. Babies need someone to read to them, so Aiden practiced, and practiced, and practiced. Dad wanted to teach Aiden how to change diapers. Maybe later, said Aiden. He decided that picking flowers for his mom was more important. 2 weeks before the baby's due date, Aiden started to worry. Maybe he should have picked different clothes. The blue walls might be too bright. He wished he could ask the baby which name they liked best. Mom came to tuck him in. Are you feeling okay, sweetie? She asked. Aiden put his hands over where he thought the baby's ears would be. Do you think the baby will be happy with everything? He whispered. I don't want them to feel like I did when I was little. But what if I get everything wrong? What if I don't know how to be a good big brother? Mom hugged him tight. When you were born, we didn't know you were going to be our son. We made some mistakes, but you helped us fix them. And you taught us how important it is to love someone for exactly who they are. This baby is so lucky to have you, and so are we. The next morning, Aiden found the boxes of his old baby pictures. He looked so different back then. It hadn't been easy, but he liked the boy he was growing into. Maybe everything wouldn't be perfect for this baby. Maybe he would have to fix mistakes he didn't even know he was making. And maybe that was okay. Aiden knew how to love someone, and that was the most important part of being a big brother. Today's story explored themes of gender identity and gender expression. Gender expression can be really fun when we give people the space to explore what feels good to them. There are so many different ways to show off our gender and ourselves. I wonder, what are some ways you are expressing or showing your gender today? I wonder, how might this change on a different day?
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
Prayer for Trans Day of Visibility. Blessed are the trailblazers who brought us this far and are still trailblazing, still celebrating. Blessed are the drag queens and kings who remind us to not take life too seriously. Blessed are the gender benders, non-binary, gender fluid, and third gender folk, those who challenge us to reframe our gender paradigms. Blessed are the young ones who present fearlessly from the start. Blessed are their parents who make space for freedom and love their children fiercely. Blessed are the siblings and relatives who educate, support, and love us as we are. Blessed are the genderqueer youth who are struggling and still persist. Blessed are the 90-year-olds just coming out and those who have been out decades. Blessed are those whose lives were cut too short. May their stories live on through us. Blessed are the survivors. May they keep on living. Blessed are the allies learning to be accomplices. Blessed are those gathered here, witnessing, learning, celebrating. May we all commit to continue showing up, fighting for justice, celebrating all the genders in life. Amen.
Giving to First Church is easy. Text GIVE to 513-717-7373, or if you have access to our Breeze member system, click Give Now. You can also give online at firstuu.com, or you can mail your check to 536 Linton Street, Cincinnati, Ohio 45219. If this is your first time visiting us, we invite you to let the virtual plate pass you by. Your presence is your gift to us. Our offering will now be gratefully received.
Hello again, everyone, and thank you again for the gift of getting to visit you virtually this morning. I've been a Unitarian Universalist for 30 years, ever since my parents joined my home church in Milwaukee when I was 6. This is the kid my parents brought to church with them 30 years ago. The Little Mermaid had recently come out, and I was instantly obsessed. This ingenious Halloween costume, made for me by my mom, quickly became a year-round outfit. I used to sit in our front yard and imagine the amazement of all the people driving past at the sight of a mermaid so far from the water. We took a road trip to visit my great grandmother and her Ocean View cottage in Massachusetts, and I distinctly remember the lengths my mom had to go to convince me not to wear my tail all the way there and quickly throw myself onto one of the glorious rocks in front of my great Gram's cottage before she came out to greet us. "You'll give her a heart attack," she pleaded. "She'll be too surprised to see a mermaid in her yard." What really made me the Little Mermaid in my mind and heart, though, wasn't the outfit, but the music. I memorized all of the songs and sang them everywhere, including at church. My home church legend has it that it was my earnest belting of Part of Your World in the lower level at all hours that inspired the music director to start a kids' choir. 1990 marked the year that both The Little Mermaid and the 1960 Broadway production of Peter Pan, starring Mary Martin, were released on VHS. These two musicals are the backdrop of my early childhood. I was mesmerized by both title characters. My very favorite childhood memory was my Peter Pan themed 7th birthday party, to which all of the guests had to come in costume. I was Tinker Bell, wearing yet another magical outfit creatively crafted for me by my mom, and I downright forced my best friend to come as Peter Pan. In true to Broadway fashion, my dad played a Captain Hook to rival Dustin Hoffman's and chased us all around the house and yard for hours. It was heaven. I was deeply blessed to have parents and a church that gave me complete and total freedom of expression. No one ever told me I wasn't a mermaid or a fairy. No one ever tried to hush my song. The first 7 years of my life were full of magic, brought to me through art and books. I was a rough and tumble princess who loved bugs and dinosaurs and dresses that could be twirled in. All of my best friends were boys, and I was the ringleader. No, really, I actually played the ringleader in a circus production in kindergarten. It wasn't until 3rd grade that things changed, that the fairy tale world that I invited everyone around me to join me in every day was challenged. That was the year that the other kids on the playground started letting me know, in no uncertain terms, that I wasn't following the rules of being a girl. You see, I was able to have a carefree childhood because everyone assumed I was a girl. After all, I wore pigtails and princess dresses, so the adults in my life never picked up on my gender nonconformity. But it was only a matter of time before my peers did. I started 3rd grade in love with life and with school. It was 1992. My elementary school had just gotten computers in each classroom, and my best friend and I were at the top of the class, competing in spelling games and racing each other through Goosebumps books. But by the end of the year, I had lost my spark. I'd always thought of everyone as my friend, but now lines were being drawn, and I didn't understand any of the rules. No longer could I wear the frilliest dress I wanted every day and run with the boys without being sneered at and mercilessly teased for both my excessive femininity and my apparent masculinity. So I made a conscious choice to try to follow the gender rules I didn't understand. I turned my back on my best friend, joined a crew of girls, tamped down the fairy tale part of myself, and tried to fit in. But it just made me even more miserable. My new friends cooed over New Kids on the Block and had posters of Justin Taylor Thomas on their bedroom walls. They played games that revolved around things like marriage and motherhood. Far from being able to fit in, I only felt more and more like a square peg in a round hole. My parents came through for me. They didn't know why I was miserable, but they had a sense that if I stuck with the same group of kids in the same school system, things wouldn't get any better. So they gave me the chance to go to a middle school for the arts across town. And once again, my life had creativity and vibrancy. I still felt adrift, but I slowly carved out a space for myself among other misfits. And I also found new musicals to lose myself in. While my friends were all arguing over which newsboy was cutest in Newsies, I was dreaming of being a singing, dancing boy on the streets of New York myself, surrounded by other singing, dancing boys, fighting the man together for a living wage for all. And while my sister Chelsea was listening to pop music and R&B, I was inescapably drawn to the yearning, bittersweet, queer struggles and dreamings of Rent. It would be 10 years before I would be able to reclaim my authenticity and rediscover the unbridled joy and fabulosity of my 6-year-old self. But honestly, 10 years of seeking and becoming feels pretty darn lucky to me as a genderqueer, non binary person who grew up with no sense that there were other people out there who weren't girls or boys, no representations of people like me beyond Mary Martin as Peter Pan. I found a way anyway. I found people who saw me as I truly am, loved me for my contradictions and fairy tale nature, and reflected back who I was to me when I was racked with doubt. I found more music and kept on singing, slowly journeying back to myself. The popular mainstream story of what it means to be trans is one of absolutes and pain. The visceral, hidden knowledge of who you are from a young age, the unspeakable suffering of being forced to live as someone you're not, the agonizing decision to tell the world who you really are, the transition that marks a closed door on the past and the emergence of the real, true you. This story isn't wrong. It's many people's story, but it's not the only story. It's certainly not my story. My story is a story of a lifelong journey and dedication to living authentically. It's a story of constantly exploring, questioning, and becoming myself. It's a story of being a mermaid and a fairy and a boy who never grows up. It's a story of knowing who I'm not long before I could articulate who I am. But ultimately, it's a story of joy. Every single day now, I get to make an active choice to be my fullest, most glorious self, the self I was made to be. And I am here to testify that when you have been told by the world that who you are is impossible, who you are doesn't exist, and you laugh and say, "Oh, honey, do I look like I don't exist to you?" That feeling, the feeling of knowing yourself and being yourself despite it all, is the best feeling in the world. It makes me feel like I can fly. My best friend Michael, who is a queer and trans black man and an ordained minister, talks about how he was called to be the person he is. Who I am right now is who I am called to be, he says. I don't know how or when that happened, and I can't explain it, but I know that it is true. And so I move toward that call every day in all the ways that I can. As I reflect on Trans Day of Visibility, which is celebrated annually on March 31st, this is what visibility means to me. It means taking the risk to live authentically. It means being visibly, authentically you, the most you version of yourself, the you that you are called to be. You see, there's a spark in each of us, not just trans people, but all people, that refuses to go out, no matter what the world throws at us. There's something that pulls us forward and compels us to be who we are meant to be. When we live from that place of authenticity, that's when we come truly alive. And when we are truly alive, we bring that aliveness forward in everything we do, all of our relationships, our work, our activism, our art, our play. In her absolutely incredible book, Redefining Realness, Janet Mock, a Black and Native Hawaiian trans woman, writes, self-definition and self-determination is about the many varied decisions that we make to compose and journey toward ourselves, about the audacity and strength to proclaim, create, and evolve into who we know ourselves to be. That's what transition actually means. Transition doesn't mean surgeries or hormones or pronouns. It means journeying toward ourselves. Transition doesn't mean changing genders. In the words of Janet Mock again, it means revealing who we've always been. For me, journeying toward myself and revealing who I've always been was a process of reclamation. It was a process of rejecting the rules and the boxes and the limits that were placed on me by our wider culture. Everything I was forcibly taught about who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to act based on who the world perceived me to be. What have you been taught about who you are supposed to be and how you are supposed to act based on who the world has perceived you to be and based on what the world thinks of as the most normal and valuable ways to be? I think of my grandmother, Lee Kapitan, who was at the top of her high school class, but was passed over for a college scholarship because she was a woman. I think of my dear friend, Lynn Young, who was socialized to be and act white and ignore the Lakota heritage and identity buried inside. I think of all my friends who have been told to hide their queerness or their disabilities or their class background in order to fit in. Living by other people's definitions and perceptions shrinks us to shells of ourselves rather than complex people embodying multiple identities, says Janet Mock. But every day we get to make a choice about who we are going to be. Every day is a chance to proclaim, create, and evolve into who we know ourselves to be. Every day is an opportunity to access the joy in living authentically. Now, don't get it twisted. Living your most visible, authentic life doesn't mean you have to tell everyone you meet every single facet of your life story and history. And I don't want you to think that just because I chose to share a little about my 6-year-old self today, you're entitled to know the childhood story of every trans person who crosses your path. My vulnerability in sharing that adorable little self that I was with you comes from a place of wanting to share more about who I have always been. Sharing with you some of the fullness of my sparkly, gender overflowing, non binary self helps you see the real me, my authentic self, rather than assuming that I'm a man simply based on your perceptions of me. I don't actually need to share anything with you in order to be my full self, because I know who I am, and I live fully from that place of truth. That's what visibility means to me. My partner Teddy would just as soon move through the world without anyone knowing that he was assigned female at birth. He is living his most visible, authentic life as a man. Being a woodworking, blue-collar, kind and gentle man is how he comes most alive and shares his aliveness with the world. Every day he gets to decide what kind of man he's going to be. Visibility is about the joy that comes from being himself, not the shock factor of telling people he's trans. Does that make sense? You don't owe anyone any explanation about what has led you to your truth. You only owe yourself the chance to live from that place of truth. The amazing and fierce Raquel Willis, a Black trans woman and a writer, activist, and organizer, says, "We are born fighting. This world tells us we aren't enough as soon as we emerge, and most of us don't get childhoods or our innocence. Many of us don't really start our lives until decades after our first breaths, if we're lucky. We are constantly in a David and Goliath battle with society and our own self-doubt. I know one day we will defeat Goliath. One day we will be loved so immensely without having to dress up our existence in articulate explanations. These are our lives. This is our world. We don't have to wait for anyone to hand it to us. We were born with our spot on this soil. We won't relinquish it to fear or ignorance. Let your pain motivate you. Let your tears dispel the fear. Let your anger incite a riot. Let your voice speak love. Let your truth be your liberation." Mm-mm-mm. Let your truth be your liberation. There's a relatively new term that has taken off among young queer, among young trans and non-binary folks. There's a relatively new term that has taken off among young trans and non-binary folks. It's gender euphoria. Have you heard it? Isn't it wonderful? It describes the flip side of gender dysphoria, that sense of wrongness in your own skin. Gender euphoria is the sense of profound rightness and joy that comes with being your true self. Folks will say things like, "OMG, my mom finally called me by my chosen name and it made me feel so euphoric," or "These heels make my gender so happy today." I want everyone to experience that kind of joy. Every single person. The sort of joy that comes from living authentically. What is it about this culture that we live in that trans people are only affirmed as real and visible through the avenue of our deepest pain and suffering? For decades, the gatekeepers of this society have said, "I'll only believe that you are who you say you are if you can prove to me that you'd rather die than live as the person I perceive you to be." What if we honored each other's joy more than each other's pain? What if we said, "I see and validate you because I recognize your gender euphoria," rather than needing a person's gender dysphoria to get so bad that the only last ditch option for survival is acknowledgement of who they truly are? Trans Day of Visibility was born a few years back, not as some trans specific National Coming Out Day, but rather as a corollary to Trans Day of Remembrance. Trans folks were answering the call from trans women of color to give us our flowers while we are still alive. Instead of the only International Day of Recognition of trans people being the day on which we mourn those lost to anti-trans violence, they created a day for trans joy, euphoria, authenticity, resilience, thriving. Trans people are a model for all of us for the joy in living authentically. Each and every one of us has a homing beacon, and that homing beacon is joy. The soft whisper of, "Come home to me," the voice that calls us to ourself, that brings us most alive. On this day, as we honor trans joy, I want to invite you to take a moment to consider who you are called to be. To what wholeness are you called? What parts of yourself have you hidden away, buried, or boxed because of the expectations or perceptions of others? What would it look like if you let them shine? Every day we have a choice. My commitment to living authentically. Every day we have a choice. My commitment to living authentically is to choose joy. I hope you will too. Amen. Ashe. Aho. And blessed be.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Schaefer, and this is Elliot Schaefer, and we're reaching out on the pledge drive this year. Philip and I have made our pledge, and we want to make sure that you guys make your pledge too to make the work of our church possible. For us, when we think back on our church, you know, I was born and raised at UU. I was dedicated in Virginia, just like we're looking forward to dedicating this little guy as soon as COVID allows. And after we got married, I was like, Philip, let's check out this church. And he went and he loved it. He loved the church, the building. He loved the people. He loved the message. Just it was a spiritual home for us. So we're really excited to be raising our son here. You know, we're excited for the intergenerational relationships he'll have with older adults and with kids who share his values and can help him like grow on a good path. So hope that you're able to give to support our mission on this incredibly exciting year of coming back together. I cannot wait to see you all. Thank you.
Hello, this is Heather Zoller. I am here to let you know that today is the official campaign close for the 21-22 First Church Canvas. However, canvassers will continue to reach out for at least 2 weeks until hopefully we've heard from every member of the church. If you're wondering where we at and looking for an update, we have currently received pledges for $301,000. Thank you so much to everyone who has pledged. But we do have a goal of slightly over $391,000 to meet our what I think is a very conservative budget for the year. And there are 65 people who have yet to pledge. So just a reminder that pledging is very easy. You can just go to the website. And please do pledge. Enter the amount that you think you can give next year, no matter what that amount is. We know that this is a tough year for some people. But that way you can tell your canvasser that you've already pledged, and then of course thank them nicely for their efforts. But that way we know when we're officially done and the finance committee can finalize their budget. And finally, just a plea to help us, to let us shine. Help First Church share our light with you, with the community, with the world. I don't know about you, I'm very proud of what we've been able to do during COVID. And I'm hoping that our giving this year will help us do more for a world that is clearly in need of the UU voice. So on behalf of Carol Willis and I, we want to thank everyone who has pledged, the people who are donating their time as canvassers. We've had great singers, we've had speakers, we've had help from Reverend Connie, from Shelley Wallace, from so many people. So thank you all, and we hope to have a final report for you before too long. Have a good Sunday.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Every